Okay, good morning. For those who are playing Big Country Football and looking forward to season sets, historical season sets, I have completed Big Country Football NFL 1958 this morning. So now we have 1985 and 1958 completed. I'm dropping them in the Google Drive. I will put a link in the description box below so you can get this. Let's go take a look at it. This is my all-time personal favorite season in history. So let's take a look at this PDF. So I do a write-up again about it, and a personal write-up. I don't try to do a historical write-up so much as how I feel about it. And then again, the teams are listed. These are units. You can certainly, when you do your statistics, you can use finders to determine which halfback, fullbacks, etc. on the field make the plays. Same with the defensive line units, linebackers, etc. This is, again, an amazing season. The Giants limped in to the championship game, having to play a playoff against Cleveland. They had to beat Cleveland 3 times. So how good was this Giants team? They gave Cleveland two of their 4 losses, or 3 of their 4 losses on the year. They beat them twice in the regular season, then beat them in the postseason. And of course, that team only had 3 losses, so the playoff loss doesn't count on the standings. But they had 4 losses. 3 of them were to this Giants team. But the Giants went into the championship against Baltimore at this point beat up, injured and beat up. And they ended up playing in the greatest NFL championship game at the time. It was televised, went into overtime, and that's what made it famous. It was the first sudden death overtime game in championship history, and it happened to be on TV, and it happened to feature, I think this game had, I don't know how many Hall of Fame coaches and players between them, something like 18 or 20 something. So it's just the culmination of the end of a brilliant decade of football. With juggernauts, the Cleveland Browns, the Detroit Lions, the New York Giants, the Baltimore Colts. I mean, there was just some juggernauts, and what a great finish. And this team, unfortunately, like I said, had to play Cleveland to get there in a playoff and beat them a 3rd time. It was either the last week of the season, and how good was this Giants defense with Sam Huff? Tom Landry led Giants defense. With Sam Huff running what would become the foundations of the 4-3 defense. It was either the final game or the playoff game. They held Jim Brown to 7 yards rushing, which is just nigh impossible to think about. Anyway, what a great season. So it starts off in order of how they finished in their conference. And of course we go through, and then what I also did was put their schedule, and I gave a short 1-sentence write-up of the team that was kind of an important, kind of a trivia or important, like this team defeated Cleveland 3 times. That's significant to me. And then of course I just show whether they beat the team. I wasn't worried about whether they were at home or away, and I want to put the scores. This was meant to just give you a starting place and to get a sense of how their season went. Overall, I mean, New York finished strong with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight victories, including the playoff victory over Cleveland. They had to beat Cleveland twice in the last 5 to lose to Baltimore. So, what a great team. Anyway, then we got Cleveland here at 9-3, and their qualities, as well as a write-up here. This team could not beat New York or Detroit, which is fascinating because Detroit had fallen on hard times, lost to the Giants 3 times, or twice, 3 counting the playoff. And then we got Pittsburgh, who had just acquired Buddy Parker, head coach Buddy Parker, and Bobby Lane at quarterback, as well as I think it was Tom Tracy. So they required a couple of stars from the Detroit Lions, which obviously affected Detroit in this season, and it helped Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh just couldn't quite get over Cleveland and New York, so pretty cool. Washington Redskins were 4-7-1, and again, they were undone by an average defense and fumbles. Lots of fumbles by this team. Let's see here. Chicago Cardinals were 2-9-1. This was a team that featured a bad defense and a not-so-good quarterback. Again, and highlights, perhaps too much passing, Coach Ivy. So Pop Ivy had taken over the Redskins and said, we're going to open it up. And unfortunately, he did so, and to his own peril, as it hurt, obviously, He may not have had the quarterback to do such a thing. Hard to say. LeBaron, I think, was McCann or LeBaron was the quarterback at the time, who I do like, but their defense bad. Anyway, too much passing. This team had a ton of passes. And then Philadelphia Eagles 291, another team with a poor defense, but unfortunately poor quarterback play. And they had a new coach, a new QB, and a defensive rebuild. So they were in the midst of changes that will, in 2 years, win them an NFL championship. So this is the beginning of the rebuild. A new coach, new QB, and a rebuild for the defense, and it's coming, and they are going to be champs in 1960. Right? Let's see here. Then we got Baltimore Colts 9-3. We know the story here. Johnny Unitas missed 3 or 4 games this year, and George, off the bench, won 2 games for him, 3 games for him. So Baltimore was that good. Johnny is the highest-rated quarterback in the game. This offense basically is superb. Remember, these numbers only modify the defensive number on the second chart. So these aren't added to every play. They just push up chances for incompletions. It lowers incompletions, lowers interceptions, lowers fumbles lost. So when you play the game, you'll see how the offensive numbers improve completions, and they decrease interceptions, they decrease fumbles, things like that. The defense, on the other hand, changes the offensive play call. So it's a unique version of full simulation football. Anyway, and you can see, again, very strong team defensively. Baltimore was the best team. They led in scoring, and they were second in points given up, only to the Giants. The Giants were the best defense in football. Went on a tear. Again, these guys were the NFL champs, so no, I didn't really need any more here. It is what it is. Chicago Bears 8-4, very good football team, struggled at consistency on offense. Brilliant defense. Matter of fact, the Bears might have been the best scoring defense. I can't remember now. Or they were within like 20 points of Baltimore, I think. But the point is, very, very good defense. Matter of fact, this defense won them 10 games, really should have won them 10 games. Anyway, their offense, basically, a great defense, but inconsistent offense. And again, you can see there were a couple amazing things here. As good as both Baltimore and Chicago's defenses, they had a 38-51 shootout. Baltimore won that. What's cool is later, when they played Baltimore, it was a 17-0 shutout. Baltimore won, but the defenses showed up in this second game, which is amazing. This 38-41 is a mind bender. And then also against LA, they had another 35-41 high-scoring affair. Go figure, because LA had not much defense, and so these must have been turnover fest. Who knows? I don't know. But this is what I love about football. This is why I say you can rate teams. You can rate them by formula. You can rate them by data. You can rate them subjectively. I don't care what you do. And when I sit down at a table to play something that I appear should look a certain way, and then you get a game like this, you would call that game. If I played the game between Baltimore and Chicago that came out this way, there'd be people who would say that's bogus, that's BS, and they'd throw that game out. It turns out these things happen, and this is the problem with people who judge the quality of a tabletop game based on what they believe, the bias of what they think about Chicago, that this couldn't happen. Well, it certainly did. And later, they were shut out by Baltimore in a defensive game. So this is why the idea of football games somehow meeting expectations, your expectations, you have to recognize that it has to resemble the quality over the long haul. And again, we know in football there is no long haul. It's the smallest sample size in professional sport. Hockey, they play 5 times the games. Basketball, they play 5 times the games. Baseball, they play 10 times the games, right? Football, you get a tiny sample. So it's very difficult to know just how good a team is, right? Los Angeles Rams, 8-4. Another team that 8-4 did it with offense because the defense not so hot. However, their DBs are phenomenal. They returned 5 interceptions. They had the most interceptions, and they returned 5 of them for touchdowns. So you do not want to slip up against this Rams secondary. Brilliant. Producing. And what the stars indicate, they just tell you that you're allowed to flip for a return. This just lets you know that the actual number they had on the season. So if there's no asterisk beside a return, you can return. You roll for the fumble, but you cannot return a touchdown. All right, and then again, they were explosive under Gilman. Gilman really tried to open up the offense, of course, but they lost to basically every good team they played. They could beat The teams they were better than, they beat. The teams they were not better than, they struggled with. The only team they beat that had a winning record, and boy was it important, was this victory late in the season over Baltimore, as it put Baltimore at risk of being in a three-way tie. Matter of fact, it would have been if not for tiebreakers. And they whooped San Fran 56-7 in this season. So that was epic. San Fran, a 6-6 team. This team was really aging, and their defense has at this point was almost irrelevant. But they still had skilled players: Joe the Jet Perry, McElhaney, Wilson. The quarterback was Brody, Y.A. Tittle, etc. So they still had some weapons. But their defense, unfortunately, I think Leo Nomalini was the best of their defense on their line. Schedule 6-6, again, not bad. This was a team that beat the teams they should beat, lost everybody else. They were getting old, and their bad defense didn't help. And so they had a 30-point loss to L.A. They had a 22-point loss to the Bears. They had a 49-point loss to the. So you could just see this team really was susceptible to getting blown out. Baltimore, they had 2 competitive games versus Baltimore. It shows what they could have been. Again, they lost to Baltimore in a close one here, and then they finally beat Baltimore at the end of the season. Inexplicably, Baltimore, and I don't know this because Johnny Unitas' injuries came in. So Johnny Unitas was injured here in a game they whooped Green Bay 56-0. Unitas went out with 3 broken ribs and was out indefinitely. He returned here. So Unitas missed 1, 2, 3 games. Returned here. So inexplicably, Baltimore lost the final 2 games. And again, they obviously at 9-3 didn't have to sweat those tiebreakers. But boy, after losing that loss to LA at 8-4 must have been a little bit concerning. And then they lose to San Fran. If LA, where is Los Angeles? If LA had not, and they beat Green Bay in the end, so they must have already known they had it won, right? They already knew the tiebreakers. Okay. So anyway, San Fran, again, getting old, and their defense completely needed to rebuild. Detroit Lions, this is a team that won back-to-back NFL championships. 56 and 57 belonged to the Detroit Lions. Bobby Lane, Hopalong Cassidy, oh my God, the defense. I can't think of all the guys. Joe Schmidt. I mean, a brilliant football team. Unfortunately, they made some big trades. Bobby Lane, Tom the Bomb Tracy, and their coach, George Wilson, I think had been dumped, if I remember right. And they were racked by injuries all year. So this team was undone by a couple of big trades that they probably, however, Rote played very well in his absence, so not bad. But the injuries really hurt this team on both sides of the ball. So, but here's the thing. They're the only team in the league that returned a kickoff for a touchdown, a punt for a touchdown, and an interception for a touchdown. So that's pretty cool. Had a miserable field goal kicker. And their defense just not what it once was. So Detroit at 4-7-1 fell on hard times, big trades, and racked by injuries. And they tied Green Bay, the worst team in the league by far, in the second week. This is a bad sign of things to come. And they had a 20-point victory against Cleveland. This was amazing because, again, Cleveland was 9-3, and Detroit had beaten Cleveland to win their title. But this proved that the Lions just had Cleveland's number. They just knew how to match up against the Cleveland Browns. That's all I can figure, right? I don't know. And then, of course, lost to really good teams in the final 2 weeks. Green Bay was miserable, 1-10-1. This team's amazing because there are 10 players on this roster that's going to win 3 or 4, maybe all 5 titles. Some of these guys weren't there for all 5 titles. But the base of this roster, the foundations of this roster, when Lombardi takes over, there's, I think, 10 guys that end up Hall of Famers on this roster. So to be 1-10-1 and be in the title hunt in just a few years is remarkable. Quarterbacks poor, halfbacks poor, fullbacks poor, split end poor, but it's not because the player names weren't here. Paul Hornig was here. The quarterback, Bart Starr, was here. Max McGee was here. Boyd Dowler was here. Forrest Gregg was here. Nitschke was here. The guys that weren't really here were, I think, Willie Wood and the defensive lineman. The big defensive lineman was not here yet. But their offensive line had guys that were going to be foundational. So it's amazing to see a team that's this bad that in a few years would end up winning 5 NFL championships. Well, parts of these team anyway. They still had Max McGee, who was fantastic. Their kicker, and as a kicker, not so hot. Again, no returns except interceptions, and then their defense was by far the worst in the league, and this is killer. I mean, again, the foundation for 5 titles are on this roster. Bears, Baltimore, Detroit, Baltimore. Again, they had their 1 victory versus Philly, who's not very good. They had a 56. They were just completely destroyed by Baltimore in a 56-0 drubbing. And never, of course, they had a tie and a win early. Must have made them feel pretty good about themselves. This must have completely destroyed what little faith they had in their coach or the quarterbacks or whatever. And then they just went on a 6-game losing streak or something here. So let's go back real quick. I want to look at Philly to see that they beat Philly. It's just fun to do this because I love this season. I'm always intrigued by these. One of the things I love about the older NFL was there were only 12 teams. So that means there were great players on every team. It was such a... I like professional leagues that are small because that means there's a lot of talent on every team as opposed to watered down rosters. The bigger a professional league gets, the less talent is on those rosters. So if you got a 32-team league, well, you're spreading what really great talent's out there. And I don't care if it's the 50s or the 2020s. You just don't have enough great players to make great rosters. And the number of people playing then weren't as much, but the number of teams and jobs available were small, so you could have really good football teams. So Philadelphia, quarterback's a killer here. Their tight end was fantastic. Their place kicker, not so hot, of course, did not have a single return, so they had obviously no team speed. And their defense is +1, +1, +1. So this is, and they were only 1 game better than Green Bay, so I shouldn't be surprised by that. But I had to come back and look. Anyway, that is the 1958 season. This has been put in the Google Docs. Hopefully you can enjoy it along with the Big Country Football. I love my Big Country Football game. I'm enjoying it. With my 85 set. I made it to be a fictional, for the Big Country fictional world. Ironically, I'm enjoying it with the 85 NFL set. So it turns out it may be better to play actual NFL seasons. I don't know, but I'm loving it. All right, everybody out there have a great day. Bye-bye.